Concerns about food security has been raised by some who argue that South Africa is extremely vulnerable and that all that was needed to shake the country's food security was a severe drought. According to the World Food Programme, neighbouring Lesotho is already in dire straits. The tiny country's maize production fell by 77% this year and its wheat harvest halved. Joining us now to discuss South Africa's food security situation, among other issues, is Joemat Petterson. She's South Africa's Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Minister, thank you so much for joining us this evening. When you made your budget vote speech in the National Assembly, had food security as your theme for that budget vote speech. Some retailers like Mr. Ackerman from Pick n Pay has warned that, it's a very real possibility in South Africa. What is your assessment? Are our sources of food secure at this stage?
Thank you very much and good evening, Karima, and to your viewers. I think food insecurity poses as the single largest threat to any country's democracy or stability. And our government's concern has been to ensure that we do not only have food security as a country, but that we also have household food security. South Africa is food secure as a country, but we do not have household food security. And that is a huge concern, and it's an area which we do work with. The very strong commercial farming sector, which has been developed in our country over years, has been an absolute bonus point for us, which we've been able to work with. Previously, I don't think government has had such a very good relationship, particularly with commercial agriculture. But then there's some mischievous perceptions which are created, and that is that there's an exodus of farmers from South Africa into the continent. South African farmers are in demand in the continent because of their skills. And instead of us perceiving this as an exodus, it's an expansion of their businesses. In the same way, your ShopRite checkers and your banks, they remain in South Africa, but they have their branches in other African countries. Now, there's a huge demand in countries.
Minister, let me get back to that distinction you made about food security and household food security. One of the big issues is that we are a big exporter of food, but even the food that is in the country, people cannot afford it because you have a spike in global food prices. And a lot of commercial retailers are concerned that a spike in food crisis might create social unrest because people are so poor in their pockets. You have electricity prices going up, you have petrol prices going up. Is this something that concerns you?
You really have a very good perception of the entire picture, because some people don't see the multidisciplinary analysis of agriculture. South Africa is a net exporter of food, but we export primary agricultural products. Now, just as we have food security in our country, but not with households, we are a net exporter of primary agricultural food. And because we import processed foods, we have high food prices and we have high food price volatility. The food inflation index for South Africa reached double digits last year, and that was a serious concern for us as an agriculture sector, but also for the country. If you have this kind of high food inflation, it means that you do not have any control or balance. You cannot really balance food prices. The most vulnerable would be your black woman, African in particular, in your farming and rural areas. They may be producing food, but they pay the most for food. So in rural areas, you'll be paying double to treble the price of food in your urban areas. But in your urban areas, because of migration to your urban areas, you also do not have food security there. Our strategy and approach was to look at urban agriculture as well as rural agriculture. Input costs in South Africa are too high. We'll get to those. Those input costs, fuel, the price of fuel went up, the the price of labor, and I am not against the minimum wage. It is the workers' right, but minimum wages, fuel, electricity, those are quite serious factors which impact on production costs in our country. And production costs are too high, which makes us less competitive. And then coming back, we import processed goods. So agro-processing has to be expanded. Agro-processing is also the part of the value chain that creates jobs. So it's just like our raw materials with minerals. We focus
to
on
add value.
Yes, but we focus on exporting primary minerals and importing processed goods, but we don't focus on it in agriculture. Yet we're facing exactly the same question. We're using our water, our soil, and we're producing food for other people.
Mm-hmm. But now, how does one reverse that pattern, and how does one add value here in South Africa?
We need to assist all farmers to enter into the entire value chain of agriculture. For now, we have only focused on primary agriculture, particularly through our land reform process. And black farmers are basically, they're clustered in primary agriculture, and then when we get them to graduate as commercial farmers, we let them also export primary products. The only way we're going to get agro-processing going is if we again have an intersectoral, interdepartmental approach where DTI, trade and industry, economic development, agriculture works together.
Now, in your budget vote speech, you said that you plan to increase the processing of investments as a means of reinvigorating specific value chains. You were talking about soybeans, rooibos, beverages, and you in fact said you'll be putting aside 50 million for allocations for the promotion of agro-processing businesses. What progress have you made? What can you tell us, Minister?
We have already spent the 50 million. That's the uncanny reality. The rooibos tea program, the Nieuwoudsville rooibos tea project, we've expanded that project where we not only grow the rooibos tea in Nieuwoudsville, but we've expanded to buy tea in from other cooperatives. We also have successfully demystified the myth that rooibos tea only grows in the Western Cape and is only exported from the Western Cape, broadening then our horizons. Now, this has increased the exports of a processed product because we put a factory there that is agro-processing, and we've added value to the product. Mm-hmm. We've even made cosmetics with rooibos tea, also then exporting those cosmetics.
Now, Minister, you've just been at the Agri-SA conference that was held in Mildersdrift, and you spoke earlier about this good relationship that you're having with Agri-SA, but commercial farmers have raised a number of problems with you. When you were at the conference now, what were the key issues that the commercial farming community, was putting on your table?
I do not think that we will have a complete harmonious relationship. I think we have different priorities. My priority is also to develop smallholder farming and subsistence farming, which is not their priority. Subsistence farming for me is also family and household food security and having family and vegetable gardens. We must have one family, one vegetable garden. Agri-SA, on the other hand, is focused on agriculture, which is more economically driven and making a profit. Their main sense is that they're commercial, they run a business, they want to make a profit. Mm-hmm. Imports and exports, especially as they perceive it to be dumping of cheap agricultural products, the chickens, the milk, has made our commodity groups like chicken and milk unsustainable. Those are processes which we debate at the WTO. Now, we do not really have complete control over the WTO processes, but many countries are becoming more protectionist about their own markets and their domestic markets. They'll use sanitary and phytosanitary requirements to keep our products out. But we've been more liberal than the liberal governments itself. Those very same governments who are opposed to subsidizing their farmers are subsidizing their farmers. And we can't compete with subsidized products in Europe. Mm-hmm. The global meltdown is also making it difficult for us to export our goods to Europe, which means our farmers are taking a dip in their exports. We want to focus on the domestic market, grow the domestic market for them. For that, we are engaging with the retail sector so that the local retail sector ring fences what they buy from South Africa. That will push up our productivity, but also will create jobs. It will address the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality.
Now, in your budget vote speech, you were very optimistic about the kind of spin-offs in job creation that we're seeing in agriculture, and you were saying that one should celebrate it, considering the fact that in the 70s one saw, you know, a loss of jobs. What is the current stats, Minister, around job creation in the agricultural sector? And given the picture that you've just sketched globally, are we able to still employ people in the sector, considering things like mechanization and so on?
The prospects for agriculture in South Africa has just been very good for us. Our sectors, certain commodity groups, have grown enormously. We have trebled our exports of wine. Now, we may think that exporting bulk wine will lose us jobs in the agro-processing where we bottle our wine here. But the nature of exporting bulk wine has increased the volumes that we export. I'm not against the export of wines in bottles. On the contrary, we must export in bottles so that the point of origin is South Africa, and we can grow this market that we have of South African wines. That is very important because we're competing at a global level. So if we've trebled our exports in wine alone, can you imagine how many grape farmers we've reintroduced, new grape farmers, new grape cultivars, and it is really creating and introducing black farmers into grapes. Mm-hmm. So Western Cape has grown, jobs have grown, exports have grown.
Do we have figures, Minister? What are the latest figures?
The latest quarter is that the second quarter of 2012, agriculture is the only sector that has grown. We've grown by 3%. The other sectors have all declined. Now 3% is not our ideal growth figure. But if the other sectors are in decline, the retail sector is in decline, the building industry and as well as the mining industry have been in decline, then agriculture's growth by 3% makes significant difference. Mm-hmm. We've also grown jobs. In the last quarter, we have grown jobs by over 20,000. In fact, the total was 22,000. We have to consider this, that in the past, we were losing up to 50,000 jobs per quarter. So we had to first balance that negative loss of jobs, bring it to a zero margin before we could grow jobs. So when 26,000 people think it's insignificant, it's a small amount. But if you think that we were losing up to 50 to 100,000 jobs per quarter, then we were losing 400 to 500,000 jobs per year.